Ben, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So like we always do, thought you could just start with introducing yourself and what you do at Chimp Management and a little background to your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ben Davies. I'm a sports psychologist. I work for a company called Chimp Management. For those of you that haven't come across it before, you might have read the book The Chimp Paradox, authored by Professor Steve Peters. What we do at Chimp Management is we work with a wide range of people to help them understand how their mind operates, help them gain insight into how their mind works through the use of this chimp model that Steve Peters has created, based on what neuroscience is informing us through research. In particular, I tend to work predominantly in elite sport. So the last couple of years in particular, I've been working on the European Tour with a few experienced European Tour players. I'm also the sports psychologist at GB Taekwondo at the moment in the build-up to the postponed now Olympics. Also done a little bit of corporate work as well, where we use this model to help some people in like major hedge funds, for example, gain insight into how their mind works. And give them tools and skills to practice in order to help them manage the mind and they want to help them achieve what they want to achieve in life, and there's nothing off limits here. It's not, all about success and achievement. It might be Joe Bloggs coming in and saying, I want to just better manage how doubtful my mind is, or how my levels of anxiety, or I just want to be a bit more content and at peace with myself. So it's a wide spectrum, really, but I think my basis is coming from using this chimp management model to help people understand what's going on. Because I think, myself included, if I think back to when I was in college and university, you don't really get taught how the mind operates, why we do the things we do, why we behave the way we behave. And for me personally, this chimp model that Steve's created is a really user-friendly opportunity to get that understanding. And I've seen it work with the athletes I've been working with. So yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, as you can imagine.
Absolutely. So let's touch on what is Chimp Management Model and what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I've referenced it enough now, so maybe going into detail would be helpful. So basically, just before I get into that, obviously, the first point that's worth mentioning is it is a model, and there are loads of other models out there. And it's not to say it's the be-all and end-all, and we're telling you this is how the brain works and this is what you should do. That's not what we're saying. This is an offer. This is a suggestion. And the key point from anything I ever say to people is, if there's anything within what I say that resonates, great. Take it away with you. Work with it. Practice it. No hard feelings if there isn't anything good in it. Just throw it away with the garbage. Okay, that's absolutely fine. But the model that we use is based on some principles that we're now learning from neuroscience. And one of the primary principles is that we're starting to find out that there are large chunks of our brain that operate outside of our conscious awareness. So we just stop at that point. That's really significant, because what's that saying, hopefully, is helping us to understand why sometimes we may think, feel, and even behave in ways that later we're looking back going, why did I do that? why did I think that? Why did I feel that? And what neuroscience is telling us is that there are the components of the brain, bits like the amygdala, bits like the orbital frontal cortex, that are reacting to life. They are interpreting what's going on, and they're trying to protect us. And it's the part of the brain that we share with the greater apes. And we've called it the chimp because it's our survival mechanism. It's constantly looking out for threat or danger, and it's trying to warn us of threat or danger, whether that's real or perceived. Now, the interesting point for me is that this part of the brain, over time, has been able to think. Okay, it thinks emotionally, and that's independent of how you and I want to think. So that's really core in that what we're basically suggesting there is we're living with another being inside of us. We're going through life with a friend or foe at times. So one principle is that there are two thinking brains within our overall brain. One we've characterized as being this emotional chimp. Another one, this represents the real you. And this is in the part of the brain we call the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the bit just behind your forehead. And what we're finding out is this part of the brain is able also to think, but it thinks rationally, it thinks logically. And it represents who you really are. So, if we use a sporting example to kick off, a lot of athletes, I might primarily ask them, what do you want to be like on the day of performance? And they say, I'd love to be calm. I'd love to be confident. You know what? I'd love to have fun. I'd love to be happy. And then they reflect on what typically turns up at competition. And they say, right, I was overthinking. I was angry at times. I was doubting myself. And you think, right, well, that's not what you said you wanted to be like. Now, that's not for me to judge. It's for me to go, there's another part of the brain that's gearing up there and offering you these ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving that are not what you would like to be. And that, again, just shows this basic premise of there's two of us going through life. So they're the two thinking components. And the third and final team that this model offers is it acknowledges memory. It acknowledges programmed behaviors, habits that we've learned, muscle memory, if you will. And we've called this part of the brain the computer. And what we basically mean is there are parts of the brain that don't think, they just do what's been programmed into it by this human component and the chimp component. So a great example in sport might be, obviously, you spend hours and hours of your week practicing a skill. Well, they're being translated into a network of pathways in your mind, in the computer, where we can call upon. And when we access it, we just automatically create that skill again. So, I always use the example of learning to drive. You spend X amount of hours in a car learning how to do all the specific aspects of driving, to a point of automaticity where now your computer can just run the program. And I've done this myself, where you drive miles and miles and miles, you get there and you think, how did I get here? Like, what happened there? And it was all automatic. But obviously, using that car example, you can start to see how intricate this is. And it's a play between the teams, because let's say, for instance, we're on the road and someone cuts us up. The blood now moves from that of the computer to what I would suggest, the area of the chimp, where the chimp's now perceiving threat or danger, and we notice a reaction in ourselves. It's not to say it's unhelpful. It's not to say it's wrong. It's to say, for you yourselves, is that reaction helping you in that situation or not helping you? So there's a unique stance to this as well. It's not an excuse model where you can sort of say, oh, that was my chimp getting the better of me, and that sort of, you can accept the behaviors that you're doing. And it's also not a model to say, right, here's where you need to be, this is where the blood needs to be, because it's up to you. We're just saying there are three different teams with three different agendas, three different ways of working, and put you back in charge. Where do you want the blood to be for the purposes of what you're trying to do?
Amazing answer. Thank you so much. I think that the car example is a really good one, because we could all relate to that.
Yeah.
I think most of us are just a bunch of chimps locked up in their cars when we drive. So for example, someone cuts us up and then we go into that chimp sort of mindset. Just those moments before we go into that mindset, what should we be thinking or asking ourselves to perhaps avoid that?
Well, again, this isn't, unfortunately, prescriptive. This isn't, one size fits all.
Yeah.
But if we look at this at a broader scale, basically you're asking me there, I hope, how do we manage this chimp? How do we, stop the reaction from occurring? How do we better manage it? And I think the starting point has to be insight and understanding. So to get a better management of this brain, it helps first to know what's happening, why is it happening, and start to accept some of the rules that happen in our brain. Because when we start to look at that, we actually start to acknowledge that this reaction of our chimp, it's not going to stop. That's inherent. That's a part of how our mind works. So it's a normal reaction to start with. And I think a way to better manage this system is to think, right, what preventative things can we put in place? a big preventative thing in this case is to go, right, I'm stepping into a car. Let's expect my emotions to come out at times. That's normal, that's healthy, especially when something like being cut up happens, because that's quite a threatening and dangerous situation. And through doing that, you're already dampening the reaction that your chimp system is about to give you, because you've expected it, you've become aware of it, and you're not judging yourself for reacting in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're creating like a greater awareness before sort of situations already happen, so you know what is going to come up, and then you can predict your actions around that.
Absolutely. It gives you a better opportunity of then being in a more human state when it happens, for you to actually think through, right, how do I, the human, want to deal with this? What would be helpful? What would be constructive? And I hope you can appreciate the link here in between this example of a car analogy and actually sport, because it's the same with some of the athletes I'm working with, some of the golfers that I'm working with. You know, step one to better managing your mind out on the golf course would perhaps be getting a better awareness of your own chimp and where it could, as we call, hijack you from how you want to think and feel and behave, and then having a plan for that. You know, and because it's so strong, this part of our brain, because it's so quick to act, you know, I find a lot of the time that these answers, these management strategies, they have to come from times that are away from the course, away from the car, so to speak, in reflection.
So let's just take it as a sort of golfing example. Would one start making a list of all emotions that could come up from a chimp point of view, and then the human, so then they've got it on a piece of paper or like recorded on Audible, just to get an idea of what may come up?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, you have to work with whatever works for you, and we're all unique individuals and we work in different ways. But I think the principle I'm trying to suggest here is, before you're going into doing something, if you want to perform at your best, it's probably wise to think through, what part of me could get in the way of this? You know, I don't want to stigmatize this chimp system, because actually all we're saying is that is an emotional thinking brain that can be unhelpful, but it can also be helpful. Now, if you are planning to do something and you want to be focused, you want to be calm, then we have to recognize that this chimp system, its default is not to be that, really. You know, its default is to keep you alive. Therefore, it's going to be vigilant. So, you know, stepping out onto the tee in front of, you know, thousands of people, well aware of the consequences of making a bad shot, you know, that is a very stressful situation for one's chimp. I can absolutely have sympathy with that. So I think, as a principle to start with, away from the course, allowing your chimp to get what it needs off its chest is really good practice. And it's something we call exercising the chimp. So, you know, as a way of managing it in the moment, is prior to being in that moment, actually allowing your chimp to say whatever it wants to say. You know, what is it feeling? What is it experiencing? What is it worried about the day ahead? Get all these out. And this could be a process that's done alone, where you speak out loud to yourself in the car journey on the way to the course. I've had athletes before who have journaled, they've wrote stuff down, they've done it on their iPad, they've wrote it down on paper. Or I've had people do it with someone. I commonly find a lot of people say, you know, it's more helpful and it's easier when I'm able to speak those thoughts out and actually hear myself saying those things. Because not only have you then got the perspective of the person listening, who can be a really good listening ear and offer some insights that you may not have heard, but also neuroscientifically, what happens when we allow our chimp system to speak, remember, it's all about blood in the brain and where it is. It exhausts itself, and the blood is then released to the human system, to the dorsolateral bit. And this is a bit where I'm sure you appreciate, you might have had this in the past, where you find yourself venting your chimp for minutes on end, and then you get to a stage of the conversation and you catch yourself and you kind of go, did I just say that? Is that really what I said? That doesn't make sense. That's actually, there's a different way of thinking about that. Does that kind of ring true?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess we don't want to sort of bury this chimp either. We just, because I guess the thing you kind of want to do is just kind of let that part of the brain just be sort of as quiet as possible, but also note that it's always going to be there. So it's not like, as you said, it's ever going to go away. So the constant work within this manner is probably necessity to perform day in, day out. And that doesn't have to be on the golf course. It could be, in your business, relationships.
Absolutely. I really like this point you're making around, not squashing the chimp system. And I think at times we've all perhaps been guilty of doing that because maybe we just don't understand what's happening. And let's be frank, some of the things that our chimp system can offer us are quite uncomfortable and quite troubling. If you're walking out onto the golf course and you've got that sense of nerves, you've got that sense of anxiety that your chimp's offering you, and it's jumping to the future, and it's worrying about the consequences of losing a competition perhaps. These are really uncomfortable thoughts, and you wouldn't be wrong for wanting to squash them and get rid of them. But what we're learning is you've got to find an approach that works best for you. And for a lot of people, the approach of just acknowledging your chimp system is offering you these things and leaning with compassion and going, right, you're telling me you're worried about this competition. You're telling me you're worried about this next shot. What's the worry and concern there? What is it? Is it that you don't feel you can do the shot? Is it you're worried about what might happen if the shot doesn't go well? And I think having that internal dialogue to yourself, and this is why working with someone else, whether it be a professional or a friend, is so helpful, because then you can start to rationalize what the chimp is saying. You can start to come up with plans of how you might address what the chimp is offering you. But without that initial dialogue and that initial acceptance of this chimp system, you can hopefully see how that's really hard to do.
So where after one has, say, done this exercise or drill before the round, I imagine the chimp would surface gently during the round, whether it be before a shot or in between shots, or even coming down to the last 6 holes when you have an opportunity to win. So how does one best manage themselves during the round? With the
I think you've made a really good point, because practically speaking, there's probably a lot of moments within 18 holes where this chimp system is probably going to pop up, and nature would say it's going to pop up multiple times, because we have a limit in our own mind. We have a capacity, and it's a skill to be able to manage the mind. And across the day we get exhausted levels, we get fatigue, and whenever we're tired or we've lost sleep, the default is for the blood to go with this chimp system. That's why, when we lose a bit of sleep, we might recognize our mood alter a lot the next day. So I think, it's really good to get a list of potential triggers. So you're ahead of the curve. You're expecting that chimp system to come in. And then it's really up to the unique individual to figure out what are the mental challenges that your chimp is offering you. And this will be unique for unique individuals. And to get this point across, I can give an example of something that does pop up quite regularly. And it's this area of expectations. So if we contemplate expectations, right, the chimp system is there to keep us alive. And the way it tries to keep us alive is to build familiarity and predictability in its world. So if you think about a chimp in the jungle, it's safe if it knows its area, it knows its territory, it knows where the predators are. That's how it feels safe. Mm-hmm. So remember, that part of the brain is in our brain. And the way it will try and keep us safe throughout the day is it will set an expectation of the day. It will say, this is how the day is going to go. It will give almost like an unconscious outcome of the day. And if we think about that in golf, well, let's even think about that in real life to start with. You wake up, you look out the window, you see it's raining, the chimp immediately jumps to, right, it's going to be a bad day, okay?
Yeah.
You might have several things in your diary, and actually the chimp goes, right, what's my expectation? everything's going to be on time. I'm going to do this in this manner. I'm going to meet this person at this time. The person's going to be like this. I'm going to be like this. And it sets this expectation. Now, there's nothing wrong in it doing that. Remember, it's trying to keep you alive, and it doesn't know any better. It's thinking emotionally. But if we, the humans, sit back and think about that, what we commonly find is there's a lot of traps that we've now set ourselves mentally. You know, by the time we get to the first appointment of the day, there's someone that's late. You know, we step outside and we drive to work, there's traffic. The car's not working correctly. You know, there's all these little bits of what I like to call reality that smack our chimps in the face. And then our chimp experiences what we call a hijack. And that might be frustration, anger, upset, whatever it might be unique to your chimp. So if we look at this within the remit of golf, you know, our chimps are likely to step onto the first tee and set an expectation. You know, let's use a really extreme example to get the point across. You know, we've won the last competition. Our training's been going really well. You know, we've had a lot of press and media saying, you know, we're doing good. And we've had a lot of people saying, yeah, I'm going to put a bet on you. Yeah, you're doing really good, right? The chimp system's already expecting to do well today. Plus all of that stuff in the computer that's reminded by the past. Now, the chimp system's going, right, I expect to win today, or I expect to hit a certain shot. Mm-hmm. Now, I know you're an ex-golfer yourself. What's the reality?
So you probably missed the cut, which actually you see it often on tour. You know, someone who's won the previous week, the missed cut is never, and that method you've just explained is a great example, I think.
Again, we're using really extreme examples, black and white examples, to get the point across. And I love how you say, like, oh, we missed the cut. I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
You know, to be a bit more nuanced there, the outcome isn't what we want it to be. You know, it could be the shot doesn't go to play. It could be the weather's different. It could be we're not on our A game today. The reality is a lot different. And I think a management strategy in terms of managing this emotional machine is to actually start to rationalize and think about, what do I have to accept about going into performance today? What's the reality of what's about to happen? And when you start to ask yourself these types of questions and probe that human into thinking, you actually now start to see a different way. A way that actually looks at, right, this is a completely new day with completely new circumstances. And actually, I've only got a small amount of control over the outcome that I'm trying to achieve here. So in terms of how you then approach trying to get that outcome, it's up for you individually to think what's helpful and what's an unhelpful way of thinking. Now, some of you might be listening going, actually, it really helps me to expect really big things of myself, go into the arena and hope for that to happen. That's absolutely fine. And if that works for you, it works for you. But I'm also hearing a lot of other people say, actually, those thinking patterns, they get me off my process. They get me thinking about things that are irrelevant, and they actually add a bit of pressure.
I get an immediate example of like a major champion trying to defend his previous year's victory, like when Sergio Garcia tried to defend his major at the Masters, and then it was like a scene out of a tin cup when he put sort of 6 balls in the water on 15, or Danny Willett trying to win his title back at the Masters. And there's so much pressure that you almost expect it from yourself to win and do well, and then it goes in the opposite direction. And imagine also in those times when the expectation is larger than perhaps another period of time, or your chimp is even more powerful, you have to do even more work during those moments to get back to, actually, I'm just here to play golf and be present.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I can't speak to these individuals personally.
Of course, yeah.
If we look at that as a great example, because it happens all over sport, doesn't it? You do see it all over sport where you get, you know, reigning champions, you get people handing over the trophy from one year, then having to compete to get it back the next year. And again, what this also highlights for me how helpful your chimp system actually is, and how much it is your friend if you choose to view it that way. Because if you think about it, our competitive nature, our desire to win, it comes from that emotional center. To show ourselves, to show our authority, to show our power, to really achieve something and push us on. And there's an argument here to look at these expectations under that scope and go, this is the chimp's way of saying, I really want to win again, and I'm going to have to really prepare myself to try and do that. I honestly think a lot of the difficulties we as human beings get stuck in is we misinterpret what our brain is telling us. Because you're absolutely right. If you're not aware of how the brain works, when you experience all them anxiety feelings, all those thoughts going into a major competition, they seem really uncomfortable and they can seem really left field. And it can even go to the point where people think, what's wrong with me? Whereas actually what we're saying is neuroscientifically, it is incredibly healthy and normal what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I'm a big follower of Darren Brown, the magician, and he wrote the book Happy, which is based on Stoic philosophy. But it was only, I've suffered with anxious thoughts on the golf course and off the golf course, but he rephrased it in, I think, his book, or it may have been on one of his sort of shows, that when anxious thoughts do appear, it's actually a great thing, and it's the way you view them that is the most important thing. The actual anxious thoughts is something telling you that something's not quite right, or there's something that you can actually work on here. It's kind of showing you the way, if anything.
Yeah, and of course, it's on a spectrum as well. So people will experience different levels of anxieties at different times and at different intensities. And it is worth just mentioning that, obviously, if you are experiencing anxiety frequently and it is seriously debilitating the way in which you operate, then that might be something to discuss with a medical professional, in terms of where now it's more of an illness, it's more of a bigger concern for you. Obviously, what we're talking about here in this instance is how our chimp can give us very natural and normal performance-related anxiety, and that's worth absolutely appreciating what our approach is to that. Because if our approach to what our chimp is offering is to go, oh my God, this is something that's wrong with me, this is something I can't deal with, then look at that in terms of what's our likelihood of being able to manage it then, if we're already stigmatizing it.
Yeah, and having this sort of list of all emotions that may crop up, and then once you actually experience them on the golf course or off the golf course, you're already prepared for them, I guess.
Yeah, that's a simple first step, and also then digging beyond it and going, well, what's my chimp trying to tell me? What is behind this emotion? And that's why I use the example of expectation. The expectation and feeling pressure to perform might be what the chimp's concerned about, but the way it chooses to tell you is through offering you anger, through offering you frustration, through offering you demotivation even. We notice this in a lot of people when they say about procrastinating. I find myself, I put things off, like I can't get them done when I want to do them. And if we look behind this, one way of exploring this and one way of understanding this is to look at, why is the chimp stopping us from doing something that we know we want to do and we probably should do? And a lot of it might be to do with the chimp fearing that something might go wrong, fearing that it might fail the minute it tries to do it. So it offers you all these unwanted feelings, thoughts, behaviours that actually stop you from doing the task that you really want to do.
I know we've talked a lot about the chimp side of things. I want to know about the human and computer side of things when actually being on the golf course and how they operate and work.
Absolutely. To start with, I think it's worth acknowledging there are three teams in the brain that operate differently, and it's up to the individual to figure out what team at what point do they want on the course with them. Now, this really fast, powerful, emotional thinking brain that we've called the chimp, there's a lot of good about it, but there's a lot also that's really unhelpful. It can be quite unpredictable and uncertain. The human part of our brain, what we mean by that is this is the factually thinking, it's a really logical bit of kit, but unfortunately it's very slow to operate. This chimp system, nature says it's 5 times stronger. That's the way we're built. It's 5 times stronger than our human system. So what that actually looks like in real time is our human system's playing catch up. It's the bit that comes in afterwards. It's the bit that reflects. It's the bit that goes, oh my God, did I really just shout at my caddy again? So I think for the human system, it's more to do with how you're planning and preparing for a competition and how you're reflecting after a competition or between rounds. And in terms of the computer, again, it's entirely up to the individuals about how they want to operate. But what a lot of athletes talk to me about is this sense of being in the zone or in like a flow state. And if we look at this through the lens of the chimp model, what we're seeing there is if we look at the computer, there are automatically programmed behaviors, skills, ways of thinking. And if we can get the blood in there and keep it in there, we have the potential to just perform as we would in training. It's not so much thinking now, it's just automatic. And you hear this off a lot of the elite athletes when they talk about their best ever performance. They say, it was just a bit of a blur. Like, I don't really remember it. It was 6 hours out on the course, but actually it felt like 10 minutes. And I can't really remember what I did, like what club I used, what shot I did. I just got on with it. And looking at that through the lens of the model and sparking my own interest here, I'd be going, oh, that's interesting. That's implying almost that the blood might be in the computer area. So it actually falls to a question of where do you want the blood to be in the brain, and following the answer to that, going, well, what's my process to get it in there then? So if it's the computer, think of the chimp as like almost a doorman to a nightclub. You ain't getting in the nightclub unless you've consulted the doorman.
Right, yeah.
So, if your chimp's stressing out about something, if it's offering you anxiety, if it's feeling threatened by something, we have to address that first and foremost. And that's why I mentioned that earlier on in the conversation. But then it's thinking, right, if we want to tap into the computer, what is the computer program that we want to tap into and how are we going to do it? And this is where, pre-shot routines come in. This is where having a plan of how you're going to speak to yourself and what you're going to remind yourself at significant parts of the course to get you into that flow state or to encourage that flow state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a great analogy with the doorman. Is like, leave everything at the door, is the saying, right? It's
yeah.
Okay, but then this could be different from each individual, right? Because someone may want to be performing in the human part, and then some would prefer to be performing in the computer part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we think about golf, you're likely to say you want an automated skill. You don't want it to be clunky. You want it to just sort of flow. You don't want to be overthinking your swing. This is what I've heard when I talk to a lot of golf coaches and golfers themselves. So I think there's an argument to say actually it's the computer system we're probably looking for here. But I do appreciate that a lot of people say, I perform best when I'm emotional, when I get angry. And again, it's worth exploring what that actually is. Is it that you're performing with emotion, or is it that emotion give you a bit of a kickstart and then that helped you to tap into your computer programs? It's for you to decide what works best. But for me, I think conscious, deliberate planning of how you want to be, and then coming up with a process, whether that is just a pre-shot routine, whether that is reminding yourself a few things at the start. Remember the expectations example we used. If we know this chimp is setting unrealistic expectations of us, we might need to remind ourselves of some more realistic expectations throughout the course of the 18 holes. It isn't simply a case of, right, my chimp's been told, now it goes to bed. It's actually a skill, and it's something that has to be reinforced over time. Very much like the initial analogy we used of the novice learning how to drive. You know, there are basic skills within driving overall, and for those to become automatic, they need to be practiced over and over again. Even when we've got our driving license for a lot of us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's again a really good example. So if I wanted to, for example, Wednesday the golf courses may be open. I want to rock up to my golf club and I want to feel and experience sort of calm, happiness, freedom, creativity. Leading up to sort of Wednesday, I can start to work on what that may look like in graphic detail. You know, I could visualize myself, you know, standing on the first tee with my shoulders back, my head up, and etc., etc. And then also, but not to forget the chimp side of things of what could possibly come up. You know, my golf club's an hour's drive away, so therefore I may, I may feel rock up tired. I may feel anxious with the current state of the environment when I'm there. You know, so is that a sort of a good drill exercise to do it like that?
Absolutely. What I'm hearing is someone being mindful of what could pop up. I'm hearing an awareness of our emotional machine and appreciating it needs to be looked after. Otherwise, it's likely to hijack us. I think it's a really, really great example. And it's like a bit of a process. How I see it is almost like recognize how you want to be. This could be applied to anything. Recognize how you want to be. And you've said, you know, I want to be calm, I want to be laid back. Then have a little think about, well, what could get in the way of that? Now, that could be something practical and external to you. So, you know, your car's playing up at the moment. Right, let's make sure it's got the right oil. And do you know what I mean? Like practical. Yeah. But it could be also emotional and it could be something internal. So what's going to get in the way? Well, I've been out. I haven't played golf in weeks. My chimp's probably going to turn up and expect the same level as I was 7 months ago.
Yeah.
And then we have to have maybe a little bit of a chat with the chimp and go, right, is that realistic? Is that going to happen? You know, what can we realistically expect? What would help to focus on to try and get that shot that we're trying to get? You're sort of priming these helpful circuits to start thinking in that way, as opposed to just turning up and doing what the chimp would do, which is to react. And it's not to say a bad thing. It's just, you know, you might turn up, your chimp might react, and it might be a good session. We're looking at consistency and what's going to work 9 times out of 10.
So it seems like the main work to be done is on the chimp side of things and the human side of things, and then but not much on the computer, because that would just be automatic after I've done the groundwork in these 2 categories. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is. Apologies, I may not have explained myself totally correctly. I think through doing the work on building an awareness of your chimp, building an awareness of what it needs, and building an awareness of some management strategies, you're programming your computer by doing that. So even through having this conversation, you know, about expectations, for instance, you've put that memory in your mind now. And every time your chimp's about to react, the way the brain's constructed is that it consults previous memories to go, have I come across this before? What bit of information can you help me to realize what's going on? So a good example I always use is almost like going to Costa Coffee. You know, obviously when isolation is lifted, go to Costa Coffee with the intent of just going to get a coffee. And before you go to pay, you're made to stand in front of that glass cabinet of cakes and delicacies, right? And obviously this is where the chimp circuit reacts. And the chimp circuit will look within itself and go, right, what's my memory of cake like? Oh, I like cake. Cake's good. How does it make you feel? Yeah, I feel really good after eating cake. Are there any other facts you want to tell me about cake? And at this point, it might be like, oh, if I eat that cake, it's quite calorific. I've already eaten a meal today, so I probably don't need that. Mm-hmm. But can you see how it's already outweighed by all of these emotional memory banks that are actually persuading the chimp to go, get the cake?
Yeah.
So then we get the cake and the coffee, and the human kicks in later on and goes, what the hell happened?
Right.
I said we were going to go get a coffee.
Yeah.
So I think that as a basic principle is, if you have a conversation with yourself prior to going to the coffee shop, prior to going to the golf course, what you're doing is you're updating your computer so that now when your chimp reacts and goes, I want a cake, the computer offers the chimp, we've already had a meal today. Remember, this is not part of the plan. How will you feel when you've eaten that cake? Whatever works for you as an individual, but it's important to think that's the only way we're going to manage this chimp, is to have a pre-programmed plan for how we're going to deal with it.
Amazing. This is totally accidental, but on Sunday I did. I asked myself a question. I was like, how can I have a better week than previous weeks? So I got a A4 piece of paper, and at the top of it I just wrote best week, and then at the bottom of it I wrote bad week, and then drew a line halfway up the page. So in best week, in that top section, I put lots of stars, lots of arrows, like moving forward. And then I listed out what all those things would be like for a best week. I can read them out if you like.
Absolutely, if you find it helpful.
So it was like, look within, confront what comes up, meditate on it, do the morning ritual, exercise daily, slow down, create stillness, have a daily plan, seek progress in everything, and be present. And then in the bad week, I put unstructured day, nothing to look forward to, check Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, email constantly, think in the past and replicate the past. So I have this in front of me on my computer where I work, and I now and again have these little relapses of, I just want to just quickly check Instagram when I'm working, or I want to quickly check Facebook. These little distractions that really break up my day. But having that in front of me, it just reminds me, actually, no, just pause, wait during those 1 or 2 seconds, slow down, and then get back to what you were doing.
Brilliant. It's almost like you've created an external computer for your chimp to look at. So every time you notice slipping into the behaviors that you don't want, sort of managed by reminding yourself, this is actually how I want to be.
Yeah, and I think it's what you sort of said was like, you know how you feel after having the piece of cake. It could be 3 or 4 hours later, but you do that throughout the course of the day with lots of little things. By the end of the day, you feel, wow, what a mess of a day I've had, when you actually could have made different decisions. And at the end of the day, you think, wow, that was really a great day.
I love the point you made about almost giving yourself basics, like on a good week, this is what I need to do to be in a good place. And that's something I would stress in terms of how do I manage the chimp. It's first look after it and give it what it needs fundamentally. I appreciate during lockdown, this may have shifted for a lot of people. Our chimp needs may have been, shifted in terms of how they're met, because we haven't got our typical 9 to 5. So, just basic things like obviously looking after your sleep, looking after your diet, looking after your exercise. These are all your basic fundamentals that keep you in a good place to even challenge some of these more difficult things that you face in life. And when we look at the chimp, one thing that we know from birth that our chimp has are drives. It is driven by certain things. A good example is food. It has a really strong food drive typically. And what that means is it will strive to eat. And when we eat, it'll give us dopamine that reinforces, yep, we've eaten, that's great. Now, difficult we have is obviously this is a drive that in the jungle, every time we go and get food, we gorge ourselves until there's no more food left as a survival mechanism. Whereas in society, maybe that's not how we want to operate. Maybe that's not healthy, and there are consequences to going with that drive. So it's important to not only recognize the drive our chimp has, but fulfill it in a healthy way that we, the humans, are okay with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example.
And I appreciate whenever we're under uncertainty, or we're worried, or we've got things that we're stressed about. Our chimps will look to sort of overcompensate with these drives, and that might be a good inroad to then going, right, I'm noticing I'm eating more than I would be. I'm noticing, I'm sleeping more than I would be. These are all little clues that the chimp is unsettled by something.
Mm.
So it's the art of being a detective on yourself, so to speak.
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on perhaps, I know you worked with, I think I first heard about your work by maybe Ian Carter, mentioned you on European tour, that you were working with sort of Lee Westwood. And this was when the phase in January, I think last year, when he won was it South Africa? And he just seemed like a completely, I mean, his ball striking's always been there, but he was holding putts from everywhere. And I think with that combination of ball striking and putting with Westwood, he's probably hard to beat. What kind of work do you do with sort of players on tour? What kind of questions do they come to you with? I wonder if we could just touch on sort of that sort of elite high performance within the field of golf.
I think it's important to recognise to start with that the likes of, obviously I'm very fortunate to be working with people like Lee Westwood and other elite golfers at the moment, and just any golfer, to be honest. And Lee Westwood was one of the all-time European Tour winners. He's up there, and he was a great golfer way before I came along. So there's an argument here to say, these recent successes, let's not let our chimp listening to this go,
for sure.
Blooming hell, the psych's the reason we're getting the wins. But one thing I would use him as an example of, and this applies to all athletes I work with, is appreciating how your mind works and getting those insights can really help you take charge of how your mind's working overall. So a big principle we've talked about today is, recognizing how your mind can derail you from a performance. And that will be unique for a lot of you. Some of you that might be, pressure that you find your mind's putting on you. Some of you that might be demotivation. Whatever it is, recognize what the unique derailer is in your own mind, and then start to think through plans that resonate with you. This is what I mean. It's not prescriptive. To some people, it might be a really pragmatic and quite practical approach where you say, right, let's think of a pre-shot routine. Let's think of things we can do at certain times of the competition to get you in a good headspace. For others, it might actually be, going a bit more complex and addressing some of the more cognitive elements around outside of golf. What's stressing you out? What's stressing your chimp out in general? Is there family issues? Is there stress around your position in life? Is there stress around your fame and relationship with the media? Like, it could be quite profound. It could be quite unique, but it's important that you recognize what's causing your own chimp stresses and you work through that with someone. And I think the likes of Lee Westwood, they're an absolute credit to themselves, the amount of work they put in and how much they apply themselves. And the art of expressing one's emotions is not an easy thing, but hopefully you can use examples like these to actually recognize its importance, and it's integral towards trying to get the best out of yourself.
I think these guys are just as human as anyone else. They really
Absolutely.
do really work hard at what they're trying to do, and I guess they're on a course of sort of, or life path of mastery of what they've chosen to spend their time doing.
Absolutely, totally agree.
Okay, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on before we sort of move into rapid fire questions, or if there's any sort of thing we've missed out on which you want to share before we move on.
I love the title of that summary piece. It really did perk my chimp's ears when I read it on the email. I think the rapid
fire questions.
Rapid fire questions. I think the only point for me to summarize is, obviously, I'm only one person with one set of experiences. I'm not saying the chimp model is the right or wrong thing to do. I'm saying be curious about yourselves and tap into any model, any way of trying to gain insight into how your own mind works to help you get the outcomes you want. For me personally, I found the chimp model revolutionary. Like, it really struck a chord with myself, and and it's something that I read, and I remember going, does this guy know me? Like, he's describing how my brain works every day. But also through practice and applying it with individuals, not just in sport, but in everyday life. It's been really helpful and beneficial for them as well. So it's just a strong nudge for people to if it resonates, read it, explore it, practice it. If it doesn't, still don't put the fire out. Look somewhere else. And try and get a bit of awareness into yourself.
Could you give an example of how you use it on a day-to-day basis and where you put the work in?
Yeah, so I think it's linking in with what I said about the athletes. It's, if you've got a plan for the day of how you want to be and what you want to achieve, that's only one step. It's very much like I always think of New Year's Day when I think of this one. Yeah. So New Year's Day, and everyone makes these resolutions. And they go, right, I'm gonna run 10 miles a week. I'm gonna write 16 blogs a week. I'm gonna achieve this. I'm gonna do this, and that's absolutely fine. But one fundamental error that a lot of people I find do is they don't consult with their chimp and go, right, this is what I'm thinking of doing. What do you think? Because you've both got to go through the journey. Yeah. You've got to carry this emotional, sometimes neurotic part of our mind through what we're trying to do. So unless you've consulted it and come up with a plan of how you're going to manage your chimp throughout your process towards achieving something, then you really are stuck. And this is what we find, obviously, is it the gym memberships by February, they're all cut in half. Yeah. Because everyone's gone, right, I'm going to really get fit. And then the chimp kind of goes, yeah, we'll do that for a couple of weeks. And then we'll see how we feel.
Yeah. That's a great example because, I think everyone makes these great ambitious goals and lists and wants January 1. And then sort of March 1, it's back to normal routine. And they wait for January 1 next year again to make the list all over again.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's absolutely amazing. I think we'll push through to these rapid fire questions as we normally do. So what is the book or other books that you mainly gifted, and why that have greatly influenced your life? Again, this doesn't have to be sort of golf related. It could be sort of all rounder.
Yeah, absolutely. I find this question really interesting, and I'm also thinking through the lens of what might help the listener, what might be interested in terms of psychology. And obviously an idiot's guide to what I've talked about today would be the chimp paradox. I've referenced it certainly enough. And there are sort of spin-off books that have come off that now that Professor Steve Peters has created. Obviously the Silent Guides, which looks at helping parents to help their child understand and manage their chimps as they're growing up. Mm-hmm. And the accompanying book, which is My Hidden Chimp, which is a more practical book for the child to go through and gain some insight and understanding at an earlier age. Aside from books authored by Professor Steve Peters, I'd have to say a recent one that I've purchased and read through and thought was actually really fascinating is Mind Games by Thomas Bjorn. I don't know if you've come across that.
No, I've wanted, it's on my bucket list to read.
I just found it really insightful and it normalized what a lot of we've been saying today around, these elite athletes just being human and having chimps and having emotional reactions like we all do, and just seeing examples of that chapter to chapter of where their emotions have come into contact with their performance and how that plays out. I think it's a really interesting read, and it's especially if someone's new to this environment, new to this world, wanting to gain a bit of insight into that. It's a good start.
Could you share or touch on a small example of what he talked about?
I think he does reference, I won't give too much away, but obviously spoiler alert. He does reference specific golfers. I think he does talk about Lee as well. Talks about previous major winners. I think he's touched upon people like Martin Keimer. And it just gives them an insight into what was going through their head at pivotal points during their careers.
Interesting.
But as I say, I won't.
Yeah.
I won't give a spoiler out, but I definitely recommend a read.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, next one. What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months? Again, can be golf related or not golf related.
Well, I think bearing in mind we've been in lockdown in the immediate present. I think the best purchase I've made recently is a new pair of running shoes to do a bit more road running and protect my ankles and my feet there. I think that also lends itself to a more wider point around, again, learning what are our basic emotional needs and learning to take care of them on a regular basis. Something as subtle as buying a new pair of running trainers, that's really satisfying to this Chimp system, in that, it allows us to exercise, it allows us to get a bit of freedom, get a bit of a change of scenery from our day-to-day, which is looking a lot different at the moment, and also gives us an opportunity to, reflect a little bit. I personally find, I know some people have mentioned this as well, that when you go running, when you do physical activity, you exhaust that emotional center, and actually it's a part of my day where I activate my human and actually come to terms with a few things. I know a few fit people in the past have mentioned they get these aha moments whilst having a shower in the morning.
Yeah.
For me, that's very much going for a run and chunking up your day and changing a scenery.
Yeah, I was actually speaking to a friend about this last night, and we said there's only sort of a handful of things which we, that we really love and care about, that are necessary sort of items. And like one of them was like running, the other one was, like golf, and just the other one was just having just shelter. They're pretty just raw items, but nothing else really sort of, everything else can sort of just, take a seat to the side and let it go.
So it's really interesting as well, because remember, we've got two thinking brains in our brain, and we've got an emotional, impulsive brain, which is the Chimp, and we've got a logical, more practical part of the brain, which represents who we really are and what we value. So, looking at a question like, you've got $100, what do you want to spend it on? It's totally acceptable that the Chimp might look at that and go, oh, I'm going to get something big and shiny. Mm. Whereas the human looks at it and goes, I'm going to get something that's a bit more practical. I'm going to do something that's a bit more aligned to my values, perhaps.
All right.
So it's not to say whether you go with your Chimp that's wrong. It's to say just be aware of the two thinking brains and make a decision that will bring harmony to the both. And I think running does that, because obviously running trainers does that, because my Chimp's looking at it going, wow, I've got these new, shiny, brilliant trainers. I get to do some exercise. And the human's looking at it going, right, I get to step out and change scenery and reflect and get back to nature a little bit.
Amazing, yeah. Very strong answer. Okay. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behaviour or habit has most improved your life?
I've been thinking about this in terms of the athletes I work with as well, in terms of just being aware that there's this other person, this other being that you're living with, and factoring him or her into your plans for the day. I think that's personally been a game changer. I think it's hopefully been a game changer to some of the people I've been working with, in that, I want today to go like this, right, brilliant, but can we now start to think about what might happen, what might cause your Chimp to hijack? Is it working with a difficult character? Is it, something going wrong? Is it an unrealistic expectation you might have of the day? I think when you set yourself up with that sort of dialogue in the morning, it gives you scope to better prepare and give you a better chance of the day turning out how you want it to.
And you just do that mentally?
Yeah, I find writing it out, I find, getting a Word document open and journaling some of my thoughts. Mm-hmm. Also making yourself accountable to it and having a discussion with a peer or someone you trust as well.
Amazing. Yep. Okay. All right. Last one on the rapid fire questions. Same again for golfers. So what one habit would you recommend golfers to implement into their game? This could be again on the golf course or off the golf course to improve their performance.
It's very in line with what I've just said regarding myself, in that, being realistic about what you're turning up to the golf course with. You've got this emotional machine that will try and perceive threat or danger. It's looking out for you. So really do give some thought as to what could be its triggers and what could be some plans you can put in place to manage it when it does.
Okay.
That could be something practically, something behaviorally, where I always know that the seventh tee on this course is really loud and there's a big crowd and I'm likely to get distracted. And it might just be saying, right, well, when I walk to that thing, then I make sure I've got a conversation piece ready with my caddy, and I just distract myself. And I just talk to my caddy, or I consult my book, and I go through the plan for the next hole. Or it might be something a bit more complex, where you say to yourself, right, well, remember why we're here, remember why we're doing this. Accept that the crowd is here and they're loud and you can't change them. You got to find what works for you. Is it sitting down and having a conversation with your chimp and reminding it some rationale, or is it just having a practical plan in place to sort of distract yourself and get yourself through it? It might be a hybrid of both.
But again, finding that out for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, it's quite a experimental process, is psychology, I'm coming to find. You have to be willing to have that conversation with someone and explore some ideas, and very much trial and error. It's not a prescriptive program, as I've mentioned.
I also think, like, you go back to Lee Westwood, actually, as successful as he is, he's still putting in the work and creating time to do this, and that's why the results are coming. So yeah, never forget that the action is probably the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. At the end of the show, I always ask for a personal action challenge. This is something you deeply believe in, or which you do daily or weekly that's greatly impacted your life, which you could recommend to listeners to adopt in theirs.
Yeah, maybe a reflective exercise to start with. Reflect back on the last time you went to the course, last time you were in a competition, and see if you can start to become aware of where your chimp is interfering. And a really simple question that I ask individuals to ask themselves is, did I want to think like that? Did I want to feel like that? Did I want to behave like that? So if you're reflecting back on a training session and you ask yourself that question and the answer is no, then that's telling you, right, my chimp had the blood at that time. And that gives you then a window to go, right, what was my chimp trying to tell me? What was he scared of? What can I think about in the future to rectify that? And it just gives you that window to actually start reflecting. It's a bit of a framework, so to speak. So looking back and going, did I want to become angry after I hit that shot? Did I want to, behave in that manner when I found out my ball rolled into the bunker? It's reflecting on what your chimp was reacting like, and then that gives you a window into exploring why it did that. I think this is just you going back to the basic point of building an awareness. If you build an awareness of this chimp system, you're already helping yourself manage it in the future.
That's an amazing answer. I think it's a fantastic way to wrap up. And thank you so much for all of this. It was I think someone's going to need a moleskin and a pen and a very strong coffee to digest everything you shared with us today.
No, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciate it.
Where can people find you, Ben? Or is there, obviously we've got the book, The Chimp Paradox by Professor Stephen Peters, but what about yourself and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on the Chimp Management website. We've all got, me and my colleagues got biogs on there. And also a little opportunity to go for a little plug now. Obviously within the Chimp Management website, you'll find little avenues for support, whatever that might be. So we offer one-to-one consultations, we offer webinars, and at the moment we're offering a free-to-subscribe troop service, we're calling it. And basically this is an online platform where we provide educational videos around the chimp model, and we provide a bit of a networking platform for people to get to know each other, share problems, share ideas, and talk it through the chimp model. So as I say, that's free at the moment, and we've got a free NHS spot on there as well for NHS key workers to go and basically gain a little bit of insight into perhaps what they might be feeling like at the moment, what they might be reacting like, and gaining some skills and tips of how to better manage themselves through the current climate.
Amazing. I think people can find that at chimpmanagement.com / join the troop. And they can join up for free, I think, there.
Certainly can.
Wonderful. Ben, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. And to your success and greatness in whenever things lift off and come back to normal.
Same to you. All the best. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. Take care, Ben. Thanks a lot.